Hey, I'm back with another video so soon after our last one, but just like that one, this is going to serve a similar fundamental purpose, which is to remind you that the 2022 Tiny House Bundle is, the sale is going to come to an end at noon Eastern Time on Saturday the 9th, so please do check that out. I also am going to take this opportunity to explain our insurance challenges, which is something that I've been meaning to do for 2 years now. And this is going to be an epic rant. Those of you who have been watching our videos know that I can talk and talk, and so brace yourself. But I'm going to try to keep it. I mean, this is so convoluted and ridiculous that I can't even explain the whole thing. So I'm going to try to keep it relevant, because this is obviously a challenge you can face pursuing a tiny house, as it happened to us. But it's also very specific to our situation. I have to explain it in sort of story form, in that we live on Kiva's family property as renters, and this is one of the great things about a tiny house, is that you can sort of make these arrangements, or we're paying rent, but it's kind of going into the family asset. And we moved here in 2014, and as you know, the tiny house construction drug on for many years. But within like a year and a half, something, we were already partially moved into the tiny house. So we've been using it and occupying it for numerous years now without any problems. And then in the winter between 2019 and 2020, so like right over kind of Christmas, New Year's time, is when the insurance for the main property and home came up for renewal. And during that time, the insurer became aware of the tiny house and started asking questions about it. Primarily, how is it supplied electrically? Because obviously, you know, a big source of claims and fires and stuff is electrical problems, which is totally reasonable concern. And I should mention that, like, right from the very beginning and all the way through, our approach to dealing with this issue was 100% honesty. Like, we didn't want to try to fudge anything and then have it blow up in our face. So we were just like, yeah, any question was asked, we'd answer honestly. Anything problems, we would try to address, and any requirements, we were just like, okay, how can we fulfill these requirements? So the very first thing was asking about electrical. Luckily, I'm an electrician, so the 150-foot run between the main house and where the tiny house is sitting was all done totally to code. There's a trench that's dug the right depth, there's the right type of cable, there's sand below and above the cable, there's like a warning ribbon buried so that if you're digging you find it. All that, it's got a proper RV receptacle, everything is perfect. We had an electrical inspection, got that approved, so there's like documentation. So we're like basically presenting that, being like, okay, here, you know, here's all the electrical stuff, even a house calculation, like the load that it puts on the main house, because as an electrician I know all about this stuff. So I'm like, no problem, I got this. Supply all that information to them. But in the meantime, they started to develop more questions about whether the tiny home was insured or not. And so obviously, honestly, we reply and say, well, no, it's not. And so we're like, okay, here it comes. You know, we knew right from the beginning that pursuing a tiny house was a risk, in that it's kind of outside the system, and we're not, if we come under some kind of scrutiny from some authority, we're going to have to face it, right? But this is not what we expected, the type of challenge we expected to face. But we're like, okay, here it comes. So they ask if it's insured, we say no, and then they were very intense and basically said, not only could we not live in it, but that the object which is the tiny house on the trailer, even though it's essentially a vehicle, they were like, it can't be on the property. So we were like, okay, whatever, we're just going to go with whatever is required until we figure this out. So we moved out, pulled everything out of the tiny house, moved into the main house temporarily, which sucked, and it was like just a total temporary setup. And we actually had a towing company lined up to come and take the vacant house over to a neighbor's place, just so that it could be off the property. We could kind of show proof and get the insurance company off our back while we figured out what the next step was. And then I think it was right when we got all the electrical documentation and submitted that, we said, hey, look, like, by the way, the house is completely vacant, it's disconnected, it's essentially a vehicle that's just sitting there. Can we just leave it there until we sort this out? And they were like, okay, that's fine. They agreed to that. So we called off the towing so we could at least leave it on the property. And we tried to find the silver lining in this by saying, okay, let's do all the work that's incomplete in the tiny house. So that was like all the storage up in the loft, the shelving, and the shower. We completed all that over the course of this period because it was easier to work in here when we weren't living in here. So we were like, okay, we settled into that process. Like, we're just going to live in the main house for a short time until we thought it was the physical work that would actually be what prevented us from moving back in terms of the amount of time that it took. But we then pursued finding tiny home insurance. At the time, there was 2 companies that would consider tiny homes, and only one of them would do DIY tiny homes. So we approached them, we filled out an application form, and it was approved. And the most insane thing about this story is that the easiest part of the whole thing was getting insurance for the tiny house. But in the application, one of the questions, and I can't remember how it was worded, was whether we have a business, like a home business, or we work from home, or something like that. And so we said, I'm an electrician. We kind of put like, yeah, we do other things, but we do have a YouTube channel and a website that generates like online revenue. And this was, again, just trying to, like, make sure there was no surprises and we were like being honest. And they came back from that saying like that everything else is good in the application, like you're approved for the insurance, but you need to have business insurance for your home business. And we were like, our first reaction was like, well, it's not really a business. Like, it's like a social media account on YouTube, and YouTube is the business, and we get, ad revenue from it. And the theme for everything that happened from this point forward is that it seems like no one in the insurance world understands how these like sort of modern, even though it's over 10 years old, people have been like living off of YouTube revenue. They don't understand how this modern online, I don't even know how to call it, like influencer, like making a living as an influencer. No one seems to understand how that works. So they basically, and by this time, the broker we were dealing with, who's the same person with the main property, and then got us the tiny house, and it was like there was so much back and forth. By this time, they were just like it was pretty clear that they sort of had enough of dealing with us, and we're like, look, this policy is requiring this. You just need to get this, and we were like, okay, whatever. Like, we were just like, let's just satisfy the requirements that are being asked of us, so that we can solve this problem and move back in. Like, that was our goal. All we wanted to do is whatever they said, we'll just do it, and then we can figure it out later if we need to, make adjustments. So then we went off to try to find insurance to cover the YouTube business. And that proved to be nearly impossible. We exhausted multiple brokers who went through what seemed like every single insurer in Canada. And I mean, this is very complicated, and a part that I'm not going to get into a lot of detail with, but the short version is that like 95% of insurers, when we said that we had a YouTube. It was YouTube, because YouTube is an American company. It's like they're like, we don't insure anything international. Like, it's Canada only. So it's kind of like, most businesses are like some brick and mortar or something that's 100% contained in Canada, and they're like, this is all, we don't deal with anything other than that. And then the few companies that would even consider us, a lot of them are like, oh, you're too small. Like, your revenue and everything is too small of a business. And this presented an insane chicken and the egg question, where it's like, well, if we're too small now, and because we don't make much money off of this, but it's enough that it was still worth our time. Like, how can we be making money, get off the ground, if we can't be insured at that state? We have to be bigger before we can get insurance, but we're not allowed to operate from home, because the home requires that we have business insurance, but we can't get it until we reach a certain size. Like, it's complete nonsense. But we finally came to the very last option that would even consider us, where we had been back and forth with the original insurer, saying like, we can't get business, like, this isn't a business, like, it's not recognized as a business by anyone, like, no one can insure it. And they're like, I was saying, like, what are you suggesting we do? Like, do we have to delete the YouTube channel? Like, do we have to demonetize all of the videos? Like, do you, there's all these insane conversations where I was like, do you have a Facebook account? Like, that, it's a social media account. Like, where is the line being drawn here as to what it is and does and does not constitute a business? And we basically were asking, like, what is the next step if we cannot get business insurance? What is the next step? Like, do we have to close the business? What does that even mean? Like, do we have to delete the YouTube channel? And they basically said, yes, like, you cannot have the YouTube channel. And you can see I'm getting frustrated just talking about this. I can't explain all of the conversations that we had back and forth, but it was infuriating and really brought to light, because we went straight from renting to the tiny house project. We had not dealt with homeowner insurance or insurance really in general, and this was like a rude awakening to how insane the power that can be wielded carelessly by insurance companies and the whole system, where in a weird indirect way, because the right hand doesn't know or care what the left hand is doing, insurers can essentially dictate what business or like situation at home can and cannot exist. Okay, I totally lost my train of thought, and I was gonna try to go back and like pick up where I left off. I can't remember. So basically my point that I was getting at was, there's situations where you need insurance, but insurers don't need to sell you insurance, which gives them this crazy power where if they just decide that what you're doing they don't want to insure, then they can essentially make it illegitimate to like what you're doing, and then you have to just like shut down what you're doing. So anyway, we reached a point where we were like considering just deleting the YouTube channel and the website and everything in order to be allowed to exist. And the very, very last insurer came through and offered us insurance at a ridiculous price, but we just paid it. It was like extortion, but we just paid it because we're like, this will at least make all this go away. So we got that insurance, the business insurance. We presented that to the tiny home. They accepted that. Now we have tiny home insurance. We presented that to the main insurer of the property in the main home, and they accepted that, and then we were done. But that's just the beginning of the true problem, because now we're in this situation where we need to renew in this insurance, all of this stuff, every year. And at any point, remember I was saying that insurers don't need to sell you insurance. Even though we have this policy as like a precedent, it's just from some company that can decide that they want to change what their offerings are. So, and this almost happened on our first renewal. The business insurer decided they were going to up their price to another insane amount. And we're already paying like 5 times the amount for the business insurance as we are from the tiny home insurance. The tiny home insurance is actually like the cost and the coverage and everything was actually made sense. Like it was, the relative amount was like to scale, it seemed. But that cannot be said for the business insurance. So, we came to the realization, especially on the at the first renewal, that this is extremely precarious, and this really is probably the main reason, the real true reason that we're not making videos, is that how can we invest in growing the Tiny Nest YouTube channel and putting all this time and effort into it if in a year, at any time in under a year, it could just get squashed by this insane insurance structure and requirements. Knowing that it's under this weird threat is just completely deflated us and taken the wind out of our sails. And it's similarly with we want to build a deck and sort of develop our little yard, our area of the property, but it's also extremely hard to feel motivated to do that, knowing that any one of these links in this chain, in this structure of insurance, could fall apart and go bad, and then the whole thing could fall apart, and we might be forced to move or vacate the tiny house again. So we're in a really frustrating situation that came at us from an angle and in a way that we did not anticipate. And what we really need to kind of go back, all we want to do is go back to the way it felt before, when we didn't have this hanging over our heads constantly. And what we need to get to that point is to have a stable situation that we feel we can reliably continue for multiple years, not just 1 year at a time, living 1 year at a time, essentially. So our renewal is up in a couple months, and I'm going to be starting the process of dealing with it soon, which I'm dreading. And I've got a couple ideas of how to approach it. Part of me wants to just start from scratch, but that's sort of opening a can of worms, because almost throwing out what we have established. But then again, like I'm describing, what we have is not really established. So relying on renewing is also not 100% guarantee. So what I'd like to request of you, our viewers, is send us an email. Go to our website and you'll find the email link at the bottom. It's contact@tinynestproject.com. If you have a story about insurance with your own tiny home. So if you or someone you know has gone through it with insurance, weird requirements or strict requirements, or gone through a certification process as a mobile home or an RV, and how that affected it, and meeting requirements. I'd love to hear some stories about your experiences with that. And also, secondly, if you yourself work in insurance as a broker or an insurance company, or you know someone, or you have a contact for someone, obviously it sucks, but it's probably going to have to be within Canada. And I know that only like 10% of our viewers are actually in Canada, simply just by the proportion of population in the US and in the world. But if you have any lead that you can give us, because it seemed like no matter how much of a rapport we built with the broker and explained our situation and felt like there was an understanding of like what we're trying to achieve and how our situation is is weird and we just want to find something that we fit into. It was like there was never any ability to create something custom or do any kind of negotiation. It was like, here's a form. Oh, you don't. And the form was so clearly like there's all these questions that made no sense for our situation, and then it would just be rejected. And we're like, can't we? Is there no option to work out something custom? So anyway, I don't even know what I'm asking anymore. I guess I'm just asking for any kind of help, really. We need help. And hopefully we've helped you. I mean, we got so many nice comments just on our last video, and even, you know, previous videos. Everyone's been so supportive and reminding us that we've helped them, and it's really nice to hear, because we do kind of feel like we're in a bubble and everything kind of went sideways on us in these last couple of years, and I'm trying to cash in on the goodwill here a bit and ask for a bit of help out there. If we've helped you, even if it's just, like I said, telling us a story and giving us some insights into what you've dealt with, that would be a help to us. If we can solve this problem, I think it will have a big effect on our mindset and how we look at living in the tiny house and the YouTube channel and everything. It will definitely make things a lot better. So that was good. I don't know how long that was. That was a big rant. So if you made it this far, this is commendable. And I'll leave you with a reminder to check out the bundle, and I'll let you know what happens with our insurance situation.